On the 21st of July 1969, NASA's Apollo 11 mission landed the Eagle lunar module on the surface of the Moon. Astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped out and made history. They were the first humans to ever walk on the Moon. 600 million people watched the whole thing unfold on televisions around the world. There were a further 5 more Moon landings until the last one in 1972. Now in the years since then, nobody has returned, and discussions about the Moon landings have shifted in tone. Where there used to be praise for NASA's historic achievements, there are now a number of loud voices that claim all of the Moon landings were totally faked. In fact, studies have shown that between 5 to 10% of Americans think the Moon landings were staged. They say they have the proof and know the reasons why it happened. My name is Danny Burke, and were the Moon landings a hoax? Firstly, why would NASA and the US government want to fake the Moon landings? Well, for many conspiracy theorists out there, it was all because of the space race. In the late 1950s, the USA and the Soviet Union were the two great superpowers on Earth. As the two rivals tried to outmatch each other technologically, space became the new proving ground. Both countries felt that whoever could master spaceflight first would show the rest of the world that their way of life was superior. The two nations began launching their own unmanned satellites into space, and then in 1961, Russia made a huge leap by successfully getting their cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin to complete an orbit of Earth and return safely. America, fearing that the Soviets were getting ahead, decided to step things up. The following year, President John F. Kennedy made a speech to the American people and the world that the USA would do the unthinkable: land an astronaut on the Moon by the end of the decade. In just 7 years. Conspiracy theorists say that as the years went on, the US realized that they would not be able to develop the technology quick enough to achieve their goal, and so they enlisted the help of directors and filmmakers to fake the famous footage so that they could say they won the space race and show the world that they were stronger than the communist Soviet Union. The conspiracy theorists say that there were a number of clues in the Apollo footage and pictures that prove they were a fake. In this video, we're going to focus on 4 of these, the main ones that come up in almost any discussion about the legitimacy of the Moon landings. Claim 1. Where are the stars? If you look up at the sky on a clear night here on Earth, you can see thousands of stars, yet the pictures from the Moon landing show a jet black sky with not a single star in sight. Is this because it was filmed in a studio and the filmmakers forgot to add them in afterwards? Well, no. Stars are visible in the night sky on the Moon, but just like on Earth, they are still very faint points of light in the sky. Just like our eyes need time to let in light and adjust to see dim objects, cameras also need time to let in light and expose fainter objects. Compared to the bright lunar surface and astronaut spacesuits, the distant starlight was simply not visible. Now, if they had let the camera sit and expose the image for longer, they would definitely have seen the stars. Claim 2. When Buzz Aldrin of Apollo 11 placed the US flag into the Moon's soil, it fluttered. Now, how could it do that if the Moon is a vacuum and there is no air? Strangely, it's actually the lack of air that caused the flag to flutter. On Earth, objects slow down as they move through the air because of air resistance. On the Moon, however, no air means no air resistance, so any force exerted on an object isn't going to be slowed down nearly as much. This is why when the astronauts handled the flag on the Moon, the force of them moving the flag left it fluttering for a lot longer than expected, because there was no air resistance to slow it down. Claim 3. In some of the pictures taken on the Moon, there appears to be multiple shadows coming from the astronauts, their equipment, and the lunar module, sometimes in completely different directions. There should only be one shadow because there is only one light source, the sun. In this argument, the conspiracy theory suggests that the shadows are actually caused by studio lights used to fake the Moon landings. In reality though, the shadows are behaving exactly as expected. Shadows will sometimes have the appearance of going in different directions depending on the surface the object is on. On flat surfaces, they all face the same direction, but on uneven surfaces, the slant can give the appearance of shadows coming from multiple different light sources. Mythbusters once did an excellent demonstration of this exact phenomenon.
We might have a problem on our hands.
Another issue some people have with the lighting is this famous picture of Buzz Aldrin stepping out of the lunar module and appearing lit up despite being in the shadow of the craft. Now, this isn't because of an external light source, but rather the fact that the lunar surface is so reflective that it lights up objects even when they aren't in direct sunlight. Claim 4. Radiation would have killed the astronauts. Here on Earth, we are protected from deadly space radiation thanks to our magnetosphere. Out in space, there is no such protection. Conspiracy theorists argue that the astronauts would have been killed as they passed through a concentrated area of radiation from the sun known as the Van Allen belts. And the truth is, yes, the Van Allen belts and space in general do emit lethal levels of radiation. This is definitely something we need to overcome if we want to eventually make it to Mars, which could take many months, but not the week-long trip it took to get to the Moon. The Apollo crafts got through the radiation belt in a little over an hour, and although their spacecraft wouldn't protect them forever, it absorbed most of the radiation over that short amount of time. There are a number of other factors that conspiracy theorists hold up as proof, but we could be here all day debunking them, so the main ones we'll have to do. Instead, it's easier to start asking hoax believers some questions. There were over 400,000 people involved in the Apollo space programs, and conspiracy theorists maintain that since 1969, the government has managed to keep every last one of them quiet and stop anyone from coming forward and providing concrete proof that the moon landings were a hoax. Thousands of independent observers around the world also monitored the Apollo missions as they went to the moon. Are we supposed to believe that all of these people were somehow kept silent by President Nixon's administration? Bear in mind that's the same one responsible for Watergate, one of the greatest leak scandals of all time. And who do you think had the most to gain from showing the world the US had not gone to the moon? The Soviet Union, of course, and yet over the 3 years of the moon landings they observed the US land its astronauts on the moon time and time again, and they confirmed that it happened, even if they wanted nothing more to embarrass the US by exposing them. In fact, not a single country on Earth capable of monitoring the telltale signals of a moon landing claimed that the US did not send people to the moon. The astronauts also brought back many moon rock samples that had been studied by independent observers around the world who had nothing to gain by lying, unless you want to extend the cover-up by a few more 100,000 people. These experts all confirm that the samples are the same as the ones brought back by Soviet rovers and are like nothing here found on Earth. Still, after all this, there are usually some die-hard conspiracy theorists hanging on, and so perhaps it's best then that we save the best for last in this video. There are pictures of the lunar modules that landed on the moon. In 2009, NASA launched the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, or LRO for short. It orbited the moon and among other things took pictures of the Apollo landing sites. Every single lunar module has been caught on camera exactly where they should be. In 2011, NASA lowered the orbiter to even capture images of the tracks and marks the astronauts left behind on the moon's surface, and the following year they confirmed through pictures that all of the flags were still standing except for one that had been knocked over by an exhaust launch. An Indian probe took very similar pictures as well. Now, unless conspiracy theorists want to claim that this too is all part of the grand cover-up, they look like they're on increasingly shaky ground. At the end of the day, there is a monumental amount of undisputable evidence for the moon landings versus claims that have all been debunked at some point over the years. For some people, they want to observe it themselves somehow, prove it to themselves, and you can. Apollos 11, 14 and 15 placed retroreflectors on the moon. Now these are small prisms that reflect light back to where they came from. Observatories around the world have demonstrated to people that if you shine a powerful enough laser at where the retroreflectors are said to be, you get a signal back. This does not happen if you shine it at any other part of the moon that doesn't have a retroreflector. Sometimes this mistrust of authorities is correct. It's true that governments have lied to people a lot in the past, but to pull something on this scale would be at best a monumental effort, and if you take all the evidence against the hoax, totally impossible. To fool millions of people, rival nations with the ability to expose them, keeping hundreds of thousands of people quiet, and somehow manage to plant every Apollo mission's lunar module and flag on the moon would be so mind-blowingly absurd and difficult that going to the moon in a rocket ship is actually a far easier option. Now don't get me wrong, having a skeptical mind is healthy and you shouldn't always believe things at face value, but skeptical minds should also be open to empirical and logical evidence like we've discussed in this video. To stubbornly deny it is not only objectively wrong at this point, but arguably undermines the hard work of hundreds of thousands of people who spent years of their lives dedicated to achieving a goal that seems so fantastic, so brilliant and so inspiring that some people doubt if humans ever could have done it. One final question people tend to have is, if the moon landings were real, why have we not gone back to it since? When Apollo 11 landed on the moon and won the space race, the Soviet Union lost interest. They weren't interested in being second place, and the US soon realized that near-Earth satellites were a lot more valuable. Going to the moon was much more of an ideological achievement, but that doesn't mean we won't be back one day. And when a new generation of astronauts lands on the moon's surface and films the old Apollo lunar modules, still preserved in time, conspiracy theorists will either have to expand their conspiracy goalposts or come to realize that in the end, hard evidence will always back up one of the greatest greatest human accomplishments, walking on the moon, no matter how unimaginable it may be. To still claim the moon landings were a hoax in this day and age would require one small narrow mind, one giant leap of the imagination. My name is Danny Burke, you've been watching Life's Biggest Questions. If you enjoyed this video guys, then consider subscribing for all our future content here on this channel. Thanks for watching and I'll see you all soon.